So we have to refocus because this is a very important panel. It's how we will live in big cities in just 20 years, more or less, when 66% of the population of the world will live in mega cities. We will look at the rise of this phenomenon and all the challenges that they pose. And after that, we have another thing, which is the action. So it's very important that you stay until the end. We are living through, as I said this morning, the biggest urbanization in history. And today, more than half of the world population lives in cities. And many of the world megacities have larger populations and economies than individual nations. For many people, women and men, of course, and children, these big urban centers represent the land of opportunity, offering better chance of employment, increased access to education and health services, overall social mobility. So it seems very positive, but of course, megacity presents also huge challenges, from safety and security, especially for women and children, to the needs of those lacking property rights. And as you know, most of the world has no property rights. So it's a big, big issue that we cover at the Thomson Reuters Foundation. We have 10 journalists covering exclusively this issue of access to land, access to property. So those who don't have property rights, who live in informal settlements, and who lack the ability to secure a stable future for themselves and for their families. Last month, the foundation did a poll. You know, every year we do a perception poll on different issues regarding women always. And what we did this time was a poll on megacities. And we had almost 400 experts in women's issues in the world, in the world's 19 megacities, one per country. Because if you take China, it's almost only megacities, so it will be a Chinese poll, and we didn't want that, because I don't know why in China they never answer very well your poll. Everything is always fantastic, you wonder. So in China, we only have Shanghai. To assess how well women are protected from sexual violence and harmful cultural practices, and whether they have access to good health care, education, and economic opportunities. These were the questions. London was the best city, followed by Tokyo and Paris. The worst was Cairo. No real surprise, because since the Arab Spring, things have changed for the worse for women. So Cairo was last, followed by Karachi, Kinshasa, and New Delhi. No surprise either. This panel features a great geographical representation with two experts from India, one expert of living in the slums and how we could do better, and the other on women's rights issue. And experts on women's rights issue in Egypt, and a tech guru who wants to use the latest developments to change the way we conceive cities. Moderating this panel, we have Emma Martin-Wingert, director at Robert Bosch, where she leads political affairs and government relations. Emma has written extensively about the smart cities of the future and the role of technology to help governments meet Goal 11 of the UN Development Goals, the one focused on, quotes unquote, making cities more inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. On the panel with Emma are Anab Jain, co-founder and director of Superflux, Imam Bibars, regional director for Ashoka Arab World, Manoj Kumar, co-founder and CEO of Nandi Foundation, one of the biggest foundations in India, and Sheila Patel, director for the Society for the Promotion of Area Resource Centers. Let's have a look at the video while you are coming on stage.
love London. I feel like it's a very inclusive city.
Opportunities, loads of opportunities.
Like with the healthcare, there's a lot of opportunities that you can get a lot of things, a lot of free things also for women.
They should work on the women empowerment because not all women have have to get married.
Words, you know, verbal abuse or verbal harassment, basically.
It's really bad, you know. You feel like you're not a human being. You're like a weird creature, you know. You're just walking and you hear something you should not hear in the street. Why?
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for being here with us. I just would like to change the pattern of the panel discussions until now. I will say we are here in the living room, somewhere maybe in Cairo or maybe Delhi. And you're more than welcome, if you like, to contribute or to ask any questions, to interrupt and just raise your hand and jump in our living room. So that will make it more interactive as well for you. Moving forward, I just wanted to say maybe some words for myself because some of the panelists, I'm sure Iman will make some jokes about me so you understand the background of it. I come from Qatar. And I was fortunate that my parents were very liberal for me actually to study engineering in Germany. And not only that, but also to marry a French after all. I divorced him after 7 years, but this is another question. Anyway, I would like to welcome our panelists. They will have about 5 minutes to introduce themselves and speak about the challenges and issues in cities. And I would like to remind you all that we have lots of challenges in our hand in this century. As Monique said, 10 billion people will inhabit our planet, and 8.5 billion will be in cities. When we talk about cities, we talk about, from my perspective, living in the UK and also advising local authorities, I talk about challenges, but from the West view. So we talk about the problems of housing in the UK, but doesn't mean that the people don't have a place to live. We talk about the infrastructure, but doesn't mean we don't have car to drive. Probably the problem in the West is totally different, that we have an unbalanced situation where people have lots of cars and maybe lots of opportunities to change their behavior, but maybe they don't do. We have demographic development in Europe. There will be the average age in the coming 5 years actually in Europe around 55. So you can imagine that the healthcare is definitely on the heart, on the core of wherever we talk on a smart cities activities in the Western world. However, as you can see from the panel today, we have more people representative from the east side, and that is very encouraging for us to learn how fortunate sometimes we are here, but as well as to try to avoid the mistakes we did in the West, in the developing countries, to do it better. And I would like now to start with Iman. Please.
Okay, hello everyone. As Iman, another Iman, was just saying we like to make jokes. So I will start with a joke. When we talked, she's from Qatar. We just became 100 million people. And Qatar, I think, 600,000. So I invited them over for breakfast, you know, so they can all come over breakfast to have and eat with us. I really want to say that when I read the poll that was carried out, I had mixed feelings. I have been presented here as the head of Ashoka. I'm a vice president of Ashoka Global and the head of Ashoka Arab region. But I have another hat, which is I have been working for women's rights for 32 years, but I was 5 years old when I started. And really, all my work was with urban women, informal areas, squatter areas. Our organization, Association for Development and Enhancement of Women, has been working with 360,000 families all over the years. We have Girls' Dreams, Arab Women Speak Out, microfinance. So a lot of work has been in the urban areas. And of course, I was in Egypt. I live in Cairo. I love Cairo, by the way, for the last 7 years. And so when I read the poll and when I was asked to come here, I kept on thinking, how can I address this? What do I do? And I decided to do something different, because I always do. And I decided to talk about the Arab Spring. Because as Monique said, and I remember coming here 3 or 4 years ago, and everybody, and even before that in other places, and I said, guys, the Arab Spring has given a blow to women. And everybody was like, why are you doing this? You're very negative. This is going to be hope. And I said, of course. I mean, we're a culture of 7,000 years. So what's 50 years to change? We can wait. So it's not a matter of 1 or 2 years. But in the time being, the Arab Spring has been a blow to women. It has been a blow to women, as we saw in Iraq, where there was ISIS, as we've seen in Libya, where girls are being kidnapped every day, and to Egypt, and I'm going to talk about that to a certain extent. But also the Arab Spring had given voice to women. And I'm going to talk about this at the end. Given my age and my experience, I'm a little different than younger generations, where I also see both sides. There is nothing is ever always negative or always positive. Our first shock when we started, when the revolution took place, the first one, we had several revolutions, the first one in 2011, we were shocked as women, especially mature women. I'm not going to call older women, mature women, exactly, that younger girls, for example, did not want the quota system. They associated with the corrupt system, and they said, no, 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 we're equal to men. We were shocked by the demonstrations in the streets by men asking the law that we have worked for so that women can divorce themselves or divorce the men, which was in religion and still is in religion. They wanted to abolish this. We were shocked by this amount of anger against women trying to get us out of the gains that we got. On the 8th of March 2011, which was less than a month after the fall of the Mubarak regime, we were attacked in Tahrir Square by men, community, not the government. So it broke our hearts. We have been working for 33 years, we've changed laws, we worked in squatter areas, we were several women's organizations, we have been very active, we have been very vocal, we're secular, we're feminists. What went wrong? And I think this is really what I want to answer. I will go quickly, don't worry. What went wrong? And I think I have two things. One is to address what I think is important for all us to remember, and I think that people always, especially in the West, but also younger generations, ignore, which is it takes a village to protect and empower women. We always keep, in every conference I went to, everywhere I go to, they keep on talking about government laws, government laws. You cannot do just government laws. We talked about it today, several people, Fatuma, other people. You cannot just say, yes, the legal framework is important. And I've dedicated all my life to do the legal framework and try to get laws and change a lot of laws in Egypt. But without the mindset of the community, we cannot do anything. What happened in... Thank you. Yeah. Without the mindset, and I'll give you an example. Everybody talks about sexual harassment. And I will answer some part of the sexual harassment when I deal with what the 7 years meant. But in ADU, this women's organization, we followed 29 cases last year. 29 cases were women from different backgrounds, and many of them really low-income backgrounds, which means they are from more traditional families, were willing to come with us, with our lawyers, to go to the police station, to go and try to get their rights because they were sexually harassed in the streets. And as we've seen in the movie, veiled girls and not veiled girls, everybody's harassed. And the problem, in 2014, there was a law. We have a new law with the new regime that is extremely strict, and that is very good law, the best law since I started working in Egypt. But The problem was not the law. The problem was not even the police station, which is usually extremely not friendly, but I kind of intimidated them, so they were friendly to me. The problem where we did not find witnesses. Because at the end of the day, when you go to court, and for example, Iman says, I've been harassed, and we take her, we have to have a witness that saw the harassment. Neither men or women agreed. Some of them did not because they blamed the victim for her dress. Some of them, including women, said, no, but the boy's future will be destroyed. Some of them were intimidated. But in 29 cases, we did not find one witness. We did everything. We went there, we were nice, we were not so nice, we tried to talk to them, we got them a priest, we got them a sheikh, we got them everybody so that they can come as witnesses. So this was the community. It was the community that refused. I think a young man called Asimi today who was talking about gays' rights and said that the government arrested people because of a rainbow flag. I guess they did. But he didn't notice the uproar, shocking, on social media by everybody that some of them I thought enlightened against that rainbow flag. It was more pressure by the social media and people and the community in Egypt against the group, the singers that had the rainbow flag, more even than the government. It takes a village to empower the vulnerable. We cannot keep on continuing asking for legal frameworks without doing anything else. The media in Egypt and the social media is a disaster. Everybody now is an expert, and everybody writes crazy stuff against women, against gays, against everybody. But also our media. Our media, whenever a girl is harassed, whenever a girl is violated, they blame her. And it's not the government media, it's the private-owned media. So here, we sat together, all the feminists, all the mature feminists, and sat together and said, guys, we really have to do something. We have been working on the government level all these years, we have been working on the grassroots level, but we forgot the people in the middle. And this is the problem. I don't think that we should not ask the government to give us more rights, of course they should, but I also think that we should focus much more on the communities. The second thing I wanted to talk about was when people talk about the Arab Spring. The last 7 years in Egypt were not homogeneous, linear 7 years at all. We had 3 regimes, 4 regimes. We had the 2011, 2012 when there was no security whatsoever. And this was the biggest blow to women. You know why? Because men took the opportunity to stop the girls from going to schools. They said, there are no security, they will be kidnapped, and some girls were kidnapped. So we will not send our girls to school. But the most, and not only this, women who are microfinance women, the urban dwellers, the very poor women, could not go to work. They had to go very early, like in the dawn and 5 o'clock, to go and buy things so that they can sell them in the markets, because there was no security.
Iman, shall we, I think maybe because of this angle also is not similar, but Sheila, I think you have something to contribute, which is not a similar situation, but there are some synergies there.
Can I say something about early marriage and sexual abuse?
2 seconds.
2 seconds, I will do this. Again, the 22% increase, no, but it's very important, 22% increase in the girls underage marriage, under 14, happened during the Muslim Brothers, but also, it's not like in America, it's not legal. By the way, when people keep on saying, underage, it's not legal, because in Islam, you can sign a paper in the family, and you don't have to register it.
That's true.
The FGM, there is a law in the FGM, a law that was applied, and by 2010, we had 30% decrease in FGM, again during the Muslim Brothers, and it is illegal. So what I'm saying is, do not just keep on focusing on the legal and the government, focus on the community. It takes a village to empower and protect women.
Absolutely, the community is the heart of it, and Sheila.
I don't know where to start. My story is very different.
You can.
Yeah, it's a living room discussion, so please jump in. Oh, another Egypt woman.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Justina. I'm a young girl from Egypt. I was also the first girl to file a harassment case from a university campus in Egypt. I understand very much saying that the mindset of the people has to be changed, but I also want to put my voice up on the table and say that maybe it's time to urge our government to put these laws into enforcement, Our president, when he was asked about the poll last week during the World Youth Conference, he said that men have to hold their hands behind their backs while talking to a girl so they wouldn't intimidate them. But I think he is mixing up his role. He's not just a man, he's the president. And I would like to see him responding to this poll by more of enforcing law, making the streets more safe for girls, and not just saying that men have to hold their hands back while talking to a girl.
I beg to differ, because there is a law that was established under this current president, and it is being operationalized among other cases, but the problem is with the witnesses. I think whatever he says, the hand, I don't understand the hand part, but I also think that the lack of security in the streets, I agree with you. We need more security in the streets, but we also, this is another story of how there is a problem between the people and the police do not want to go because of the thugs. But that's another story, but I agree with you. I think there is a need for more security. I don't think it is just the role of the government. I think we always do this. I think it's the role of everyone else.
Exactly, it's the role of the community.
Yeah.
Sheila, back to you.
I want to take you in another direction. Monique spoke about cities, and I think that in today's world, we're not able to understand how present cities in the global south function. And so God help us when from 30% in India today, for instance, 32% in urban areas, we'll go up to 50, what that will mean. Out of the 40 cities that will be mega cities, 25 will be in the global south. And it won't be that the rural landscape will be empty. What it will be is many of those rural areas will become medium and small towns. And in other instances, this sea of megacities will encompass these villages. Now, it's important to try and imagine what that means. If you look at today's cities, you will find that between 30 to 70% of people live informally. We look at this issue of human rights. 30 to 60% people have no right to live in the city, and they squat on somebody's land, as a result of which those who are poorest, those who come from the village with no assets, those who work informally, are constantly evicted by the city itself. So this means that not only are they poor, but they constantly face harassment. A lot of NGOs work to bring some health, some education, some welfare. But there is nothing that addresses the sheer volume of what is needed. And so I'm part of an amazing network in which some of us who are professionals decided that the traditional community organization process is rubbish, and that what we really need to do is to build social movements of the poor who start rethinking their own role and function in the city, and don't wait for other people to take care of them. And at the center of this process are women's networks. There is nobody as passionate about secure tenure, safe neighborhoods, creating neighborhoods and communities than women. And yet, whether it's international development or local NGOs, the minute an external person comes in, 3 men trot out, and they become the representatives. Nobody questions how are they allowed to come in the front? Why are the women standing at the back? But it's to do with the fact of what we've all been discussing all day, that the imagery of leadership is usually 1 or 2 men. And so what we started in Mumbai as a network of slum dwellers today operates in 70 cities in India, in 33 countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, and in 500 cities. we still feel we're very small. But the idea that I want to give you here is that for a very long time to come, rights, laws, lawyers, courts are not working for the poor in the city. They don't have access to water, to sanitation, to a safe place to stay. They don't even have, in many places, an identity. They are invisible to the structure of planning and finance in the city. And it is to these informal, humble locations that conflict refugees, rural caste-based or tribal-based internal migrants, and households who are hungry in rural areas. And now increasingly, people who deal with, people who come out of ethnic cleansing, people who come out of climate crisis are going to come. So the future scenario, so we were all talking, you're going to look at one set of scenarios, looking at it from a technical and this issue. We're looking at it from the point of view of how transformative movements of the poor, focused and built by women, transform not only their neighborhoods, but transform their cities. So when women's networks in our areas go around the city, they don't care if the woman who's been harassed is one of them or somebody who's from the formal city. They've learned to get identity for themselves. And the most magical thing that they do, in which they've started to use technology, is they map every informal settlement in the city and challenge the government to say, do you know that we exist? You have all signed on the development SDG goals. You're supposed to leave nobody behind. You've left 60% of the city behind. And so what we find is that in every city, in every neighborhood, there is a repetition of the stories that I have heard all day today. And so I finally see a very interesting connection, and I see the huge potential of what women's networks, who start by empowering themselves to survive in the cities, can do. Because we cannot only depend upon the law, we cannot only expect our presidents and our prime ministers. They have let us down immeasurably. It has to be a groundswell of people who shame their politicians, who shame their elites to do this. And so I'd like us to start reimagining this thing, and I think the beautiful thing I saw here is the transformation of the victim into a person who empowers not only themselves, but their neighborhoods and their communities.
Thanks, Sheila. I think we need a man view here as well.
Somebody wanted to.
Yep, please.
My name is Samantha. I'm coming from Zimbabwe. I wanted to support what the lady has just said, that the poor don't exactly need these laws or something. We need to fight with them as villages, as communities. The civil society has got a really big role to play when it comes to these laws. In fact, when they're trying to fight for justice, even in the courts, it requires money, which they don't have. And the access to justice system becomes even more difficult for them. So I just want to say that the civic society and all of us need to help in the fight for rights of the poor people. And also I wanted to put up this point that we need everyone in the cause. I've seen how the women's movement has moved in my country. They get a buy-in from everyone, from the men, from women, from young girls, from young boys. And I think this is the direction that we have to take if we want any movement to go forward. And pull in everyone. I'm a disability rights activist, and I'm trying to get even non-disabled people to speak out and make disability rights be important even to non-disabled people. Because at the end of the day, right now the women's movement now has a quota even in parliament. And we in disability rights are fighting non-disabled activists to say it's not good, it's not whatever. So I think that we need everyone in each struggle. So if you're in civil society, you should get a buy-in from companies, from whoever, so that your cause can go forward.
All right. Thank you very much for that. Okay, I think,
Is it okay?
please.
So before I get into girl and the city, let me contextualize a bit about the body of work I do and why I'm here. So when I'm asked in India, what do? I tell our organization, the Nandi Foundation, has 3 thematic areas of work. And people ask, what are they? I said, 1, it's girls up to the age of 15. 2, it's girls after the age of 15 till the age of 25. And 3, it's women after the age of 25. They say, but you mean that's only girls? I said, but that's a lot. If I go to United States and talk, I try to tell them, because in the circles that I go, it's partly often the Aspen Institute or related leadership seminars that I go, I tell them that our foundation works only on one theme, and that is racism. So they say, you mean casteism? Because we know India is full of caste system. I said, no, the greatest racism that is prevalent and continues to exist, unmentioned, is the huge racist patriarchy of suppressing the race of being a woman by the other race called the men. And so my journey and the foundation's work is only to end that. And it is to bring this to be not just a gender issue, not just an aspect of inferior or equality, but this is actually racism. And 20 years working closely with girls and women, this got more and more reinforced. So let me take you to paint a picture of what does it mean to be a girl in India. There are various ways of doing it, but I will tell you the way I have learned it by working with them. So first of all, she should be very lucky if she's alive when she's born, because feticide is so common. And then if she survived feticide, then infanticide, female infanticide, she has to survive that. If she survived both, she should survive malnutrition, so till the age of 0 to 5. And if she survived all the 3, she has to survive the idea of having to go to school. So the work we started with girls, we call it the project Nanni Kali, which means a young bud, is because you don't let them blossom to become a woman. You nip them on the bud. So the challenge was, how do we get to pockets in India where it is an unwritten rule that girls need not go to school? We have on camera men consistently telling, including in some cases women, that the only reason a girl has to exist is to procreate. So why would you come and ask them to be in school? So you have to start from there, and we spent sometimes a year to get the legitimacy from the community that can we have a deal that we'll get all the girls into school. And then can we agree that we will provide them private tuitions, because otherwise the ethos that they like to spread is girls can't learn as good as boys. So because they are first generation learners, you fail them and throw them out of school again. So we ended up doing private tuitions for them after school hours. And this is where the first idea came to us, because as we did in remote rural areas, we thought we will try also in urban areas. Very often we are supported by corporates who help us do this in some, and very often they say you have to be working in cities too. And that's how we started cities, to be very honest, because early days I was under the impression that to be a girl is worse off if she's in the village than in the city. Still, we started working in the cities to discover probably it's the other way around. And the first exposure to that I want to share is our tuitions that we do happen in the school premises after school hours. And it's for 2 hours. We found out that most of the girls in the cities said it is the best 2 hours of their life, not just because they were learning. Almost all of them, and I'm talking about Delhi number 4, Mumbai number whatever, and various other cities, they said, we don't want to go home. Because from the time 3 to 5 is when we are normally home alone. And 3 to 5 is where we would have some man in the house lurking for us. And very often in an urban setting, in a place like Mumbai, you have a 6 by 10 room which has 20 people living sometimes 10, sometimes 8, because there is continuous migration from villages to the cities in search of livelihoods. And it is a cultural thing to accommodate them in the first family that made it to Mumbai or to whichever city. And they are all unemployed youth. They may be cousins, they may be uncles, they may be friends' sons. They're hanging in the house, and the girls don't want to go home. It's such a shocking revelation that if you are in cities, your habitat, which is not only fragile, is also often the most unsafe place. So when people really complain about the challenges of walking in the streets, the reality for teenage girls, very often in cities, is the threat begins even in the house. This realization started more and more curiosity for us to understand girls in cities. And one of the things that we have been humbled to realize is 2 things are going to stay here in this world, whether we like or not. 1, the power of markets. And 2, the fact that mega cities and cities are going to happen, urbanization, like it or not. And this is going to be continuous. And if this is going to be continuous, the most vulnerable and the most affected are going to be girls. Cities, and I want to draw your attention to, despite my moderator's work on this field in a noble way, I looked at traditional reports that are floating on inclusive cities, resilient cities. India is very fashionable these days with what is called as smart cities, you know. And then we have sustainable cities. The discussions, please go through them in detail. There is no room for girls there, even in the reports. The reports are predominantly looking at, especially from an implementation point of view, from a budget allocation point of view, it's about, will we have the subways, will we have the metros, will we have energy, will it run on electric, biofuel?
More flyovers.
I mean, for whom? More flyovers, but for whom? There is no discussion of what will be the habitat for girls. Will there be parks for girls? I mean, no girls in cities. I mean, we had this inspiring talk on football. You'll have to play on the middle of the street because anyway the traffic is there and no car is moving, so it's better we use it for football. There is no playground left. So the challenge of, and the fact that migration is rampant and people are continuously coming. When we go through the European crisis of migration, I like to share that for the last 40 years, India has been dealing with migration pretty much the same bad way Europe has been dealing, or everyone else has been, because we don't know what to do. You cannot stop them and they're coming to cities. There is no place for them. There is no education for them, no sanitation, no habitation, and this is going to continue. So the point I want to share is safety is at risk for girls after they survive. And post that, the biggest challenge they are facing is the only way they are defined to be safe is by getting them married off early. And we just completed a 1.5-year nationwide survey, and in the next couple of months we hope to release it, the largest of its kind, and it looked at what does it mean to be a girl in India. While the report findings are going to be shared globally because it has taken a lot of us by surprise. We used 3,000 young women to do the survey. It took us 3 years to perfect the questionnaire, and we are hoping we can make enough noise about what the country's girls want to tell. We focused on aspirations, we focused on fears, but this is a place I don't mind sharing. One of the thunder that they gave us, almost every girl in every nook and cranny of India had one singular common message: we want to marry late. If at all we marry.
This is, again, probably cultural and as well as...
Because they don't want to get married till they are economically self-reliant. So I want to pause by telling that it's very inspiring to take back stories from this conference about how the stereotypes are broken, how freedom is obtained, how people show daring courage. On a long-term basis, what I want to offer and tell is the best vaccination that we can ever have to end this racism is to ensure every girl is educated and every girl is made economically self-reliant. I'll pause.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I think this is really inspiring. But I do see, and maybe now, Anabis, your target to bring hope to the discussion, and I think technology could play a positive part on this, on the safety and the healthcare issues. So, please.
Yeah, I think I should introduce myself a bit because I think I'm the odd one out here. So I think
I thought it was me.
No, it's definitely me. I'll just put things into context of what I do. And I think it's really inspiring to hear about your work and stories throughout the conference, from activism point of view, or campaigning, or running long-term foundations. I am actually a designer. I am not running a very kind of a social organization in that sense. But I run a design company in London called Superflux, and I'm also a professor of design at the University of Applied Arts in Vienna. And I think I am actually thinking more and more that I am probably, the work we do is a kind of activism, but I think it's coming from a different perspective. So I and my colleagues in our studio, we spend a lot of time thinking about the future, thinking about many different possible futures that could happen from now, 10, 15, 20 years, 50 years from now. We are constantly listening out for trends, those murmurs of future potential, and then we extrapolate those trends out into the future, and we ask questions like, what might it be like to live in this future? What might we see? What might we hear? What might we breathe? And then we actually run experiments. We build prototypes, we make films, we create immersive experiences, and we essentially make the future concrete and tangible, aspects of the future concrete and tangible, so that people can really feel the impact of those future possibilities now. And so the reason we do it is we want everyone to be an active participant in the future that they are creating, that everyone has a voice to play, a role to play in the future. And I can give you quick examples, but I think what we have learned in our work is that why we do this is because one of the most powerful means of affecting change is when people can directly, tangibly, and emotionally experience some of the future consequences of their actions today. Decision makers, campaigners, citizens, organizations who are working, who can see that if I make a decision today, this is how it will play out. And that can be very powerful. So we do work with technology, we do work around climate change a lot. One example, for instance, earlier this year, we worked with the government of UAE to help them understand how to invest better in renewable energy. So there were 5 scenarios, one is business as usual, and then there was like, full-on renewables, but they were hesitant. So we actually were presenting futures to the ministers and to the Prime Minister. And one of the things we did was we created, we worked with scientists to create this a sample of air pollution from 2030. Excuse me. And so when the Prime Minister walked over, excuse me, we, sorry. We actually made him smell future air pollution. And we said that if you don't do anything, the air in the future is going to be so bad that you wouldn't want your children to live and breathe this air. And I think that made a difference because they've decided to invest a lot more in renewables. I have a cough, so I'm going to stop now, but that's the context of what we do.
Thanks, Anna. It was really inspiring. I have actually a question for you, Iman.
Okay.
I know you would like to say something. Iman, we're talking about community and we're talking about the Arab Spring, and obviously if I compare the revolution now for 20 or 30 years where we didn't have access to internet as we have now, I'm just trying to find that there could be a positive link to technologies to actually be for us as a garden engine or something like that. And do you think that, for example, internet and all of the pictures we saw of the Arab Spring brought maybe democracy and as well as the voice to be heard from community we didn't consider before. So this is one question, it's not only for Iman, it's for everyone here, but I just am trying to understand for the city's perspective, and I agree with you about the reports, there are always shiny reports about certain areas. We never talk about the community itself. So what's the view of the panel of that? And you're welcome to start.
I'll talk about this, but I also want to talk about the future because I have a big nightmare about some scenarios about the future cities. It will destroy women, in my opinion, but I'll talk about this. Not yours, something else. No, that's what I wanted to say. The Arab Spring had a lot of immediate negative things, but on the other hand, it was women. Majority of the people in Tahrir Square the first time, the 8 million or 10 million, were women. When we rose against the Muslim Brothers with direct democracy, which we think it's direct democracy, in spite of anybody else's opinion, 33 million people went down to the streets against the Muslim Brothers, and the majority were women. In the elections afterwards, for the current regime, 90% were women. So women suddenly are in the streets, and women, regardless who they are, what is their background, a lot of people who are not educated at all went to the streets, especially the second time against the Muslim Brothers. There were women in the streets, and you could see the YouTubes in rural areas in Upper Egypt where women are not allowed to leave the house. So we cannot say that women are not now more seen. Women now are discussing the Islamic, or whatever, people think it's the Islamic dress. Now people are free to do whatever they want to. We are not judging. But what I'm saying, women are starting to question women are discussing religion. There are a lot of secular women now coming on the media, the social media, and really discussing things with the Azhar, which is theoretically, the representation of Islam in Egypt. So women are talking about harassment, about sexual abuse, about the rights. Even LGBT women are talking about it now for the first time. I mean, and their parents are approving, some of the parents, again, through the social media because there is no other place. So we cannot say that the Arab Spring was all bad. I think for the immediate stuff, it's bad. I always like to be positive, so I think at least it showed us that there are things we have to talk about, not only focus on governments, but also talk about people.
But what helped this revolution to explode, and I think is this
Which revolution?
Not revolution, but maybe the people going out to the street and demonstrating, is that most of the younger generation were actually communicating through the social media. So do you think that helped to organize themselves?
I think if you have lived, I have lived, for example, there were people born under Mubarak and died, and when Mubarak, and never saw anybody else. So I think if you come from a community, and even me, we never thought anything will change. So I decided to work on women's issues. So what I'm saying is that I think the fear, the aura of authority has been broken, and people were given voice. Bad or good, saying a lot of, at the end of the day, we have a lot of crazy people saying crazy stuff. But at the end of the day, suddenly, after many years in my life, people are able to speak about things that they never spoke about before because this wall of fear of authority has been broken. So it is because of these people who went down in the January, of course. I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of the people, but I was just telling Sheila before, the people who went, she said that the revolution in the Arab world or the Arab Spring started by this very poor man burning himself in Tunisia.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But actually, the people who revolted in Egypt the first time were not the poor. The people who revolted, the young people who revolted in January 2011 were educated young people who had no hope for the future.
We're talking here about actually two castes, let's say. And I'm using this description, what I heard it today as well. But I'm just saying here that because we're hearing that the poor in the cities are not heard. But it's very interesting, Iman, that you're saying actually not really the poor, they went out the first to the street, actually where let's say the medium class, maybe the rich.
The middle class, It was the middle class, people who had aspirations. I mean, in the 30th of June, you found more poorer people, but not in the first one. But a lot of women, and this is very important, women were given a voice. And I think that regardless of all the negative things that are happening, I believe in history. And it took 17 years for the French Revolution to see the result. So we have a lot of years in front of us, and it is not like there is a magic wand we're going to wake up in the morning and become Denmark. You know, there is a revolution, and we will go through it, and we are going to learn.
Absolutely, and this is really very encouraging. I would like to bring Sheila, because you mentioned her, and Sheila, as I said, you mentioned, Sheila, that the poor don't have a voice, and I really would like to pick on that point again. In your perspective, do you think the medium class in India exists to be the part of the community to help actually improving maybe the poorer life? I'm just trying to find what is the way of helping. I mean, you are a volunteer, obviously, and we have to salute you for that. But how we bring all of the community to contribute from different castes, if you like.
I have a different take on this. I don't think that most middle-class people in most of our cities actually care a damn about the poor.
Yeah, I agree, by the way.
And the fact is that in most cases, poor people are locked in that imagery, men, women, children. So a very important part of our international movement, which is called the Shack Dwellers International, is to transform that from within. So, Manoj, when you talk about this crisis of women feeling uncomfortable, we have women who develop a range of ways to deal with this inside their neighborhoods and outside. So when we started having women's groups, and this is not only in India, this is in all the countries where we work. And the beauty of this movement is that we have today 5,000 women in these 33 countries and 500 cities that can go to any city, anywhere, and train women and young girls to transform themselves. Today, women from those neighborhoods are national and international leaders of the movement. They sit and negotiate with governments and private sector. And I hope that the next time one of us gets invitation, I don't come here and one of them comes. They're much more powerful speakers than I am. But really the reality is that we live in a strange world where in every city, the Gini coefficient is getting worse and worse. We have a few people who are very, very rich. You have a struggling middle class which now feels empowered to feel that the city and the government owes them something. And you have this large number of very poor people who actually make all our lives comfortable, but we keep them invisible. We don't give them wage. So when you talk of slavery, you have to look at how many of us as middle-class people in the global south participate in not paying people enough, of having young girls and boys working in our homes. We have a big movement in which we see this happening, and we have situations in which there is this constant fight of how informality is destroying their city. So we have a serious problem. And we have an even greater problem because the young people in informal neighborhoods, especially young men, have not only an angst of not getting employed, not having, and still retaining what in Hindi we call mardani, this confused imagery of what being a man is. And we have so many incidences of not only violence in the neighborhoods, but violence in the city. And so there is no healing, negotiated reconciliation that is happening that will address this issue at the moment.
This is interesting, definitely, and we, you know, Manoush, I would say you sacrificed your life for the women and girls, actually, and whatever you said, it's definitely an honor, actually, to talk to you. But I'm just wondering, I have two questions to you. First of all, on the comments of the community, and again, the gap between the poor and the medium, or actually the rich, is definitely will even be worse, I can tell you, from lots of statistics we are seeing. But how, when we talk about the community, and we say the community is actually the heart of cities, and we cannot change cities if we don't change communities. So how could we bridge that, first of all? And secondly, is there any personal reason why you're sacrificing your love for girls, which is really wonderful?
He has a daughter.
No, so I tend to agree with Sheila on the point of, during the civil rights movement, we spoke about the Martin Luther King spoke about the silent, moderate white. And you have the same crisis of the middle class in every society, in every city, just being nonchalant to what is happening around them. As long as their needs are met, they're fine. So that continues to be an issue. But I have hope in frankly, given our demographics, because we have what is referred to as the millennials, and we have a situation where more than 60% of the country is below the age of 25. Yeah. 60% of the country. To your point, I would imagine the next time I have somebody speaking here from India should be someone who is 17. Because that's kind of the age, you know, to say
future.
the complete country is going to be challenged by people who are below the age of 25. So the challenge for them is they are building communities, as far as I'm concerned, on the virtual space. And they're struggling to figure out how to build real communities. And there are no spaces in the cities. And the 200 million, 250 million constituency, which is the underprivileged girls, they don't even access to a phone. So they're caught between, and they fall through these cracks. There is this millennials who have their communities, and then there are cities with no spaces, villages which have to be deserted to go to cities. So where will my 250 million girls go? Which community will they build? Is my perennial question. We need to find a way to give them a community. So we graduated over 12 years,
Maybe 1 second to...
I'll pause.
Yeah.
Hi there, I'm Judith. I'm going to facilitate the next session, the action sessions. My background is finance, business, economics, and when I listen to debates like yours, I always come back to a fundamental issue that we have when we discuss the circumstances, the conditions in which all these imbalances take place, and that is how we perceive economics. We always think about economics as, you know, who has strong GDP growth, India, China, always being out there with, so and so many percentages. And what it boils down to is GDP is a pile of money. So if you have, for example, a war or an epidemic, that contributes to great growth, when we all know that is not great growth. So is there some perception or some thinking in your context where you're addressing that we go back to the drawing board and think differently about how we create growth? Where we then integrate, as you were saying, you know, you're building smart cities in India, but you're not thinking about the value that could be contributed by having green space, safe places for women, playgrounds, and so forth. Or going back to building, you know, concreting over nature, when actually nature, when it's not concreted over, it has value as well. I personally am a tree hugger. I perceive nature as the best asset that we have on the planet, because very soon, further down the road, we'll have, with all the migration problems, especially in Europe, we'll need to think about how we grow food. That's one of the problems coming down the road.
Yeah, exactly. I think probably Manoush would like to answer that, because that came on the top of your saying about the reports published without considering actually girls and the problems in the community. And then Emmanuel will come back.
I really have to talk about safe places. Yeah, when you finish.
Yeah, so I want to respond by saying that the world has, among various problems created by men, one additional problem, that is they decided the semantics of economics and finance. And so success is measured by net worth. Success is measured by GDP growth. Success is measured by very quantifiable things. And that became the yardstick for discussion of anything that is successful to emulate. And this is part of the problem. If we can take out the semantics from the patriarchy that we have created to have feminine discourses on what is success, probably you go to the villages or the cities and talk to my mothers that I work for, or for the girls, and ask them to describe success. They would say if there is no malnutrition, it's a rich place. If there is playground for girls to go and play, it's a rich place. If there is a place where all the girls are in school and studying, it's a rich place. If it's a place where the property is in the girl's name and not in the husband's, it's a very, very developed place, they will say. So It's a question of changing the narrative from a masculine language to a feminine language. The greatest enemy of poverty is patriarchy, not politics.
Absolutely agree. Yeah.
I love you.
Iman, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say this thing because it scares me. I have been going around about safe places for women or safe cities. And I was in a couple of conferences all over Europe, and everybody was talking about, yes, we have to create a place where they can play or a place where they can sit. And in Egypt, they had the car in the metro for women, and they want to have a taxi for women. It scares me because this is segregation. Instead, the nun said it very nicely. We don't have to cover ourselves so that they don't look at us. We don't have to hide ourselves because they don't molest us. We don't have to go around and play somewhere else because we don't want them to see our legs. We have to be equal in the street, equal in the garden, equal in the gym, and they don't have to harass us.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Anna, would you like to jump in as a technology, not technology, but the designer in that perspective?
I was going to answer to your comment on progress, and the entire narrative around progress has been created for economic progress, and every aspect of our future, which then becomes our present, is bundled as an instrumentalized bundle of risk, which can be measured, and uncertainty can be measured, and every technology is available for us to measure that uncertainty. But so, for instance, if you think about technology in the cities, the smart cities idea is basically there are 5 companies in this world who are currently making sure all of us are addicted to this. All of us, every aspect of our lives, every single data set from our lives is useful, is monetizable. The industry is worth $400 billion. So that the reality is that our future of our cities are being shaped by 5 technological giants who want to make sure that all of us are hooked in, plugged in into a network which will constantly show us what we've liked before, and will make sure that our experiences of the world are limited to this. And to your point about food scarcity and climate refugees, I think we in the West here need to be really careful about that, because we are going to have a lot of local climate refugees. Food insecurity and food shortage is actually going to be our problem here. Just recently, we've created an apartment from 2050 in London. But you walk into this apartment and you see how the entire space, which was initially given for relaxation, has now been transformed into a food production unit, because you cannot grow food outside because there are broken supply chains. I think we think of ourselves in the West as that's their problem, it's not our problem. But actually, we close the window, you open the window, the fire's there. In terms of safe spaces, youth here in London have no safe spaces. There is a law which does not allow more than 4 young men to gather in a space.
Really?
Yeah, if they gather in a space, anybody can call and ask them to get out from that space. So actually, these are here in London, this is a problem.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I would like to take a question here.
Can you hear me? Okay,
Yep.
Thank you. My concern, we're speaking safe places in the megacities, and my concern was that I've never heard anyone speak about the rising tide of the non-standard employment, in which we see a lot of megacities being infiltrated by short-term jobs, whereby people do part-time jobs, hourly jobs, and I don't see our cities being safe in the sense that labor laws actually now protect only standard employment. So I'm saying, where is the economic growth or access to decent work in this? What is your advice on this issue?
Okay, who would like to start? No, we'll take that and then we'll take another question, but you could start.
Let you start.
Yeah.
I didn't understand the question.
One of the challenges that we face is when young girls, after the education, they ask the question, what do I do for a job? And in reality, and I'm discovering it right from New York, Manhattan to Mumbai to any other city in the world, because of the constant migration that is coming in, any job is a job for survival. And whether it's, as we were discussing in the break earlier, whether it is the nail spa in New York, or whether it is any of the retail outlets that are burgeoning and consumerism creating new jobs, in every place there is not even a minimum wage. And we need to shift that and move towards fighting for what was yesterday described as a living wage. So the challenges are when you're fighting for an identity in the city, you have just migrated and came in, you're fighting for a job, you're fighting for a place to live in, it's difficult to find for them a voice to fight for something much more complex, which is a living wage or a minimum wage. So I think there is a need for people who are already in the cities and who are actually playing the role of consumers to give them that voice. And we are silent consumers. Mind you, all these changes can happen if we as consumers can raise these voices for the migrant women who come in. And it is for us to fight for that as consumers and not for a non-profit, not for a trade union to do it, because they're fighting to get their inch of space. And I just want to add an additional point here, which is when we graduated in the last 10 years, 250,000 girls, and now we work with 130,000 of them. One of the things that is bothering me constantly when I ask this standard ice-breaking question of either what do you do in your free time, which is a very benign question, or what do you want to, what do you dream of? Believe me, even today, most often girls stare at me blank-faced because they don't get the question. There is no leisure time. So what do you mean by what do you do at free time?
Maybe they don't have role models, you think?
No, there is no time.
Yeah.
And second, they don't have any sense of what the future is. So there is this patriarchy stereotype which even mothers in cities do to even well-to-do children, that you can't do this because you're a girl. He can do it because he's a boy, and it is still prevalent.
It's a stereotype.
We need to break this.
But going back to poor girls who are educated, I think minimum wage is very important in the labor law, but the labor law also has other problems. For example, with the lack of safety and security in cities, especially for poor girls who have no voice and they cannot take jobs. For example, you cannot be a nurse if you come from a poor area. Not because you cannot be a nurse, it's because it's very dangerous because you have to go at night and there is no security. You cannot work and go and buy your things in the dawn, as I said. So I think minimum wage is a very important issue, but labor laws, there are laws in Egypt, for example, that prohibit women working at night. When you cannot, so again, we have to look at a more comprehensive look. Yes, minimum wage is important, but is the place safe for girls and women to walk and to go to their jobs at night and early in the morning?
I'd like to take another question.
It's a comment, really. Just, I was glad someone that mentioned nature, but I think one of the biggest risks of megacities is that we do become detached from the other species that we all depend on. Someone reminded me at the beginning of this summer that in the 70s, when we drove anywhere, we used to get so many insects, they'd be encrusted around our windscreens and on the headlights, and you used to have to clean them, and I looked at my headlights and I didn't find one insect on from the whole summer. And I think it's very easy for people in cities to forget what's going on or not to listen to the scientists who do monitor what's happening with nature. So our population growth needs to be restricted so that we can keep some semblance of reliable balance with other species. And the key, it seems to me, to limiting our population is that we build safe communities. And then when people feel secure enough, then when they have the opportunity, then we can try and limit our impact on other species.
This is an interesting, of course, comment. Limit our population, and this is obviously is one of the issues when we talk about 10 billion will inhabit the planet in this century. And when we talk about all of these problems, and one of the, we have only 4 minutes, so I would like to use that really for final closure remarks from the panel, but as well as how, and again I'm coming back to the smart cities and also to the technologies measures, how that could help at the end of the day to make cities smarter. And also I learned from you and from others that we need to rethink the KPIs, or really the key measures to justify a city to being smarter or not. And of course, putting the feminist and woman language in the heart of it. So I will start with Iman and then Sheila.
I don't know if I'm going to answer your question really, but I just want to say my last message is it takes a village to empower and protect women, so everybody has to be involved. Listen to the women. Do not come and think that Egypt is going to be India and Egypt is going to be Denmark. We really have to listen to people and see, and to listen to the poor. I really agree with Sheila. I mean, nobody listens to the poor. And everybody talks on behalf of the poor. People revolt on behalf of the poor, but they never ask them any question. People talk about the poor. So everybody, we should really think of, yes, the government is important. Yes, there should be laws. But again, the men, the women, the corporations, the businesses should be involved. We should not be taken too much with technology, it scares me, and we should not be taken too much with science and progress and, cars without drivers and everybody will be with no jobs.
It's coming.
But I think it's a problem because we're going to be 10 billion and we need jobs. Listen to women, listen to girls, listen to the community and work with the community so that we do not only emphasize and criticize every government on earth without having a voice ourselves.
Thank you.
I'm actually a smart city skeptic. If you imagine a scenario where your entire infrastructure is networked and is managed by one person who understands how it works and can be remotely hacked, and next minute, if you're a cashless society and you have no cash on you and the servers go down, you cannot buy milk. And you have no idea of how to access any of that technology. So I think I would prefer if we create systems and mechanisms that enable citizens to get smarter rather than our cities.
Thank you.
I think the real challenge and crisis, like you said, is related to the growth model, in which the ability of a few people to make lots of money is the reigning major mainstream imagery. And there's this phantom belief that you might be one of them. But the reality is that a world in which there is equity, where there is access to basic things for everybody has a right to do things, is treated as an ephemeral dream. We don't aspire for that. We don't want that because we want to be that person who has lots of things and lots of consumables. This is the myth within which we are all trapped. It's like you saying that, how much consumables can I have? At whose cost? And at what cost to the world? So I think that a lot of women in the neighborhoods I work with have an alternate vision. A lot of other women, a lot of us have those visions, but we never pronounce them, we never aggregate them, and we don't produce a critical mass that challenges this paradigm today. So
thank you. Manoush would like to close with a man today. So
thank you. I'll speak for women anyway. So I think the challenge to me is the paradox that cities are often planned by men. And boys and men, when we work with, have one big handicap, which is we are wired to be instant gratification species. We want everything instantly. So the thinking is short term. Unfortunately, cities are planned for a mayor's term. Cities are planned for somebody's 10 years. Cities are never planned for 500 years. This is the challenge. When we work with girls and sometimes talk to the boys as well, we ask a boy, what will you do with education? He often tells you, I will do this, this, this about himself. You ask, invariably a girl will say, I will ensure my daughter will be far better than I am and far better than you are. There's always a wired tendency to think for the future generation for 100 years ahead. Whether it is getting trees in the cities or the other animals, leave it to the girls, they will plan the cities better.
Good.
Thank you so much. Please applause for the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's very good.
Thank you, great panel. And leave it to the girls. Thank you. Thank you, Manoj. Very good. Thank you.